going on a cruise by yourself?
Aren't you going to be lonely?
Who are you going to talk to?
Why don't you wait for others?
What are you going to do?
I couldn't go alone. So you want to go on a cruise, but you have no one available to go with. I can tell you from personal experience, you shouldn't let that stop you, because if you wait for others, you may never go. Don't get me wrong, traveling with others could be very enjoyable, whether it's traveling with family, friends, special someone, significant other, it's all good. But if they're not always available, what does that mean for you? So in this video, I want to talk about 7 things that you should know about traveling solo, and 1 bonus tip. So you hear about other people going on a cruises solo, and you would like to find out for yourself. Or you wanted to go with others and they're no longer available. It happens. Not everyone's always going to be available when you are. But I'm here to tell you there are many reasons for you to go by yourself and still have a great time. First things first, let's talk about your cabin. So sailing solo means you have the bed to yourself. The cabin is your cabin. You come and go as you please, relax when you want to relax. If you have a balcony cabin, you got the balcony to yourself. You're here to relax, unwind, enjoy the ambiance, the scenery. The balcony cabin is for you and you alone. The next thing I want to talk about is the exploration of the ship. In sailing solo, you have the freedom of coming and going as you please. You don't have to worry about wondering where the next person is, meeting up with them in time for lunch or dinner or even breakfast. Now, of course, if you meet other people on the ship and you want to meet up with them for breakfast, lunch, or dinner, or even catch a show together, then that's up to you. It's your prerogative, but you're not obligated the same way you would be or would feel if you were sailing with somebody. And speaking of breakfast, lunch, and dinner, the third thing I want to talk about is the food. So I know what you're probably thinking, eating by yourself seems pretty lonely, and for a lot of extroverts that could be true. I myself am an introvert, so I like the solitude. But the cruise lines thought about that, and for all you extroverts that don't like to eat by yourself, you have options. So what I mean by options is when you're sailing solo, in most restaurants on a cruise ship, the cruise line will sit you with other solo passengers by default. Now you do have the option of changing that and making your table a solo table or for you and one other person, but you do have options. So the fourth thing I want to talk about is the solo meet and greets. Most cruise lines will have solo meet and greets starting on the first day that'll be hosted by the cruise line. Days after that, it might be unhosted, but for the most part, the first day is when it's going to be the most active. So if you are trying to meet other solo passengers, I strongly suggest trying to go to the solo meet and greet on the first day, because from my experience, the unhosted events from day 2, day 3, and so on and so forth aren't usually as active as the first day. The cruise lines will host other events as well, such as 80s or 90s events, as well as LGBTQ+ events and things along that nature. But they're not always going to be hosted after the first day, so keep that in mind as far as activity and engagement. The fifth thing I want to talk about are excursions. So whether you're choosing an excursion from the cruise line or an outside source, you have a number of options, so keep that in mind. Now the trick here is to choose one that is solo friendly. What I mean by that is there are going to be excursions for the families, excursions for couples, excursions for solo people and solo travelers. Some examples of a solo-friendly excursion would be a walking tour, or even a trolley ride or a train ride, because those type of excursions, you don't have to be with a group or a friend or anything like that. You don't have to know anybody else on that excursion, but it's something that you can do by yourself, you can do with others, hence the word solo-friendly. This could also include exploring the island or your destination on your own. You don't have to be with a group to do so, and you don't even have to be on an excursion to do so. Now, when doing this, I recommend majorly keeping track of the time and keeping track of the ship time, because the ship time is not necessarily the same time that you're used to. It could be an hour behind, it could be an hour forward. These are those things that can get you left at the pier if you're not careful. I'd also recommend speaking to some of the people on the island, like some of the employees there and such, or even some of the locals there. Because a lot of times they're going to know what's best for groups, or what's best for families, or what's best for solo travelers. A lot of times the locals could tell you the best places to eat and drink on the island, as well as the places off the beaten path that are, great for like excursions on your own, or just some of the nicer beaches and stuff that aren't just so touristy and things along that nature. When it comes to getting around on your own, there are some locations that are better than others. So far, my two personal favorites are renting a Twizy and renting a scooter. Now, the Twizy is a little electric car. Sometimes it's one person behind the other, driver in the front, passenger in the back, or sometimes they'll be side by side. But either way, it's a fun little way to get around. And like I said, it's in a little electric car. One of the perks to exploring this way is seeing everything at your own pace. So if there's a particular beach you want to see, or a restaurant you wanted to try, or something you had on your list, you travel at your own pace. You don't have to worry about the excursion, or are we going to have time to do this because everybody else wants to do that, and so on and so forth. You go where you want to go, when you want to go. Of course, as long as it's throughout the ship's time. Another option is doing an excursion that's hosted by the cruise line. One of the excursions I've done in the past that I've really enjoyed was ATV rentals. And there I got a chance to see the island, just go on some of the off-road locations and just have some fun. I've also rented a scooter in the past, and that was also very fun. Now, keep in mind, all these things I'm mentioning that consist of vehicles, whether it's a Twizy or a scooter or an ATV, they all require driver's licenses. So if you have a driver's license from wherever you're at, then you're usually good to go. But if you don't, then you might want to think of another type of excursion. My suggestion is checking a cruise app or website to get a better idea of what your options are, so you know ahead of time and you know what to look forward to. The sixth tip I want to talk about is, in the midst of getting a lay of the land and exploring the ship and such, talk to the staff. In just about all my previous solo cruises, the staff really added to the overall enjoyment of my cruise. They've asked me from time to time, are you cruising by yourself? And then when the answer is yes, they tend to open up and actually tell me a little bit about themselves. And it's always pleasant to hear. That's one of the many great things about cruising. There's so many variations. You have the option to relax. You can party if you want to. There's so many great people to meet, whether they work on a ship or they're actually just cruisers like you. Another tip I want to mention before tip number 7 is take a lot of pictures and videos. Believe it or not, a lot of staff actually like taking pictures and helping the cruisers out, especially if you ask nicely. If you're like, oh, can you take my picture over here or take a video over there? They'll be glad to help. And not only will they take the picture and video, they're going to try to make sure it comes out professionally. So last but definitely not least is tip number 7, which is choose the right cruise line for you. So you're probably like, choose the right cruise line for me? What do you mean by that? And that, my friend, is a good question. So what I mean by that is different cruise lines have different styles, or you could even say different vibes. Think of it like how some restaurants are different from each other. For example, some restaurants really try to cater to family friendliness, and then other restaurants try to cater to like couples and romance and such. And then some try to be all-arounders, or best of both worlds. So the reason why this is going to make a big difference is because some cruise lines are going to be heavily catered towards families. And although that doesn't sound like a bad thing, if you're there on a solo trip, you might feel a little bit out of place or possibly even left out. A few examples would include cruise lines like Carnival, Royal Caribbean, Disney Cruise Lines, and maybe a couple of others. Now, don't get me wrong, that doesn't mean you can't sail on those particular cruise lines and such, especially if you find a great price. But, like I said before, those cruise lines tend to cater especially towards families, so you might feel a little bit out of place. So you might be thinking, then which cruise line would be better for me on a solo trip? And there are a few that would fall into that category, such as Virgin Voyages, Holland America, Cunard, and you can find a few others. Even there are some, Carnival trips that might fall into that category, and some of the other cruise lines that I mentioned earlier. It really kind of depends on not just the cruise line, but the cruise ship itself as well. Each cruise line doesn't have a one size fits all, or I should say, one ship fits all mentality when it comes to their fleet of ships. Some cruise lines are heavily towards a multitude of different categories. Like, for example, there are some ships that are catered towards the older crowd. And when I say the older crowd, meaning like 65 and older, or even early 60s and older. There are going to be some ships that are catered towards the younger crowds, just like there are some ships that cater towards families and such heavily, such as, like, say, the Icon of the Seas or the Star of the Seas. And then you're going to get a mixed bag, like, say, some MSC cruises and Norwegian cruises. For the most part, most of the cruise lines, as well as their individual cruise ships, are going to have a lot of similarities. They're going to have their party vibes, they're going to have their relaxing time, their relaxing vibes, and then they're going to have a mixture of the two. But just like if you were going on a cruise with family and friends or loved ones, it pays to do your research. See what you're looking for, and not just because you're solo, but what interests you. And once you figured out that, then start price shopping. Basically, compare prices. How much would it cost if you went with other people in comparison to how much it's going to cost when you're by yourself? And the reason why that's also important is because, once again, it's not one size fits all. Some cruise lines actually have better solo options when it comes to pricing than others. Some will charge you double occupancy, unfortunately, which is a worst case scenario, whereas some cruise lines will charge you basically 1.5%, so meaning a person and a half. And once in a blue, you might even get lucky and get even less than that, depending on the cruise line and even the cruise ship itself. So normally I'd end the video here, but I did mention earlier that there would be one bonus tip, and that is, say you booked the cruise for two, and let's just say in this scenario, you're the lead person on the booking. But for one reason or another, the second person can no longer go. So you think to yourself, well, okay, even if I wanted to go by myself, that means I'm still paying for both people, right? And I'm not going to get that person's money back because, say, they cancel at the last second or they can't go and it's less than a week before the cruise. So what do you think you should do? And although I recommend using travel insurance, let's just say you didn't, and travel insurance is not available, and this is not a medical reason. They just got cold feet and decided not to go. When you go on that cruise by yourself, you will get some of the money back after your trip. The money that you will get back would be port fees and taxes, and you won't be paying gratuities for two people. So ultimately, it won't be a total loss. So those are my 7 reasons, plus a couple of bonus tips on why you shouldn't pass up the opportunity on sailing solo. So hopefully this will be enough to convince you not to pass up on the opportunity. Maybe start with a 4-day, 3-night cruise, so this way you could actually get a better idea. And then, if you like it, you could always go for a longer stay. What do you really have to lose, besides an enjoyable cruise? Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe.